Don't block out the Eiffel Tower.
Bonjour, dickheads. Welcome to another episode of The Vlog. It's a very special episode because I'm here with Mr. Luke Thompson from Luke's English podcast. Say hi.
Hi.
If you're wondering why we're using microphones, I normally have my microphone on top of the camera, but we figured because we're going to record a podcast, the sound is going to be better if we both have individual microphones. So that's why we're doing this. Also, we're comedians, so we like having microphones to speak with.
Right, exactly, yeah. And also, because we've got these like soft things which makes us look like we're journalists.
That is, yeah. And what do journalists sound like, Luke?
Journalists sound like this. I'm standing on a rooftop talking to Paul Taylor. Paul Taylor's an Englishman who lives in France.
Yeah. Also, we are here on the roof terrace with a nice view of the Eiffel Tower. I don't know if you can see it. Just if you are watching this on a computer, you can probably see it. I don't know if you can see it on your iPhone while you're taking a shit, but maybe you are, maybe not. The reason I wanted to speak to Luke was a couple of days ago when I was in Barcelona, I did a video about learning languages and how to learn languages and my opinions on learning languages and the things that might be useful. Luke is actually an English teacher as well as a comedian. Maybe you just introduce yourself. Tell us everything that you do and where we can find you as well.
I'm actually an English teacher as well as a comedian, and I do a podcast for people learning English, and it's won awards, and you can find it on the internet. If you just go to my website, teacherluke.co.uk.
So yeah, Luke teaches English, and I thought I would ask him some things about learning languages, because a lot of you have been asking, oh yeah, cool. There are a lot of good comments on the video about learning a language, about accents and things like that. And yeah, I thought since you teach English as a profession, and you also help people learn English through your podcast, first of all, so I was talking about why learning a language is important and things like that. What's like the question you get asked the most by learners of English, and what's your kind of answer to that question?
Actually, because I've got the podcast and the website, I get lots of random emails and messages from listeners. So one of the things that people will often write to me is just, how do I learn English? Or I need a British accent. How do I get a British accent?
Right.
It's often like really big questions.
Yeah.
Like, how do I learn English to perfection? How do I become like a native speaker? And I'm just like, Jesus Christ.
It's a bit more complicated. Just be like, well, here's step 1, step 2, step 3.
You want me to just write that all in one email, or like in a Facebook message to you? It's that kind of big question is very complicated and very difficult. I think one of the things that maybe the mistakes that people make is they set themselves a huge goal like that. They're like, I need to speak perfect English, or I need to have a perfect British accent. And I think that that's maybe one of the mistakes people make, is they need to scale it down a bit and try and identify more achievable goals.
Right.
Take it step by step.
Yeah.
Because if you think of learning a language as one huge thing you've got to achieve, then it'll be insurmountable. It's too much.
Yeah, it's I think for a lot of things in life, you can have an overarching goal, which is I want to get perfect at English.
Yes.
That's the overarching goal that you need to always have in your head. But then you can't just have that as a goal and not have any mini goals in there, because otherwise you just get lost, right?
I think it's important to be ambitious, of course, because you've got to aim high, but at the same time you do need to realise that it's going to be a series of small steps to get there. And so often what's better is to break it down into lots of little things, and you might have to prioritise certain aims over others. And I mean, where do you start? Depends on the purpose for which you are learning the language. Is it because you want to move to the UK or somewhere like that? Do you want to get a job in the language or whatever? And it's probably a good idea to identify exactly the main reason why you want the language, and then to adapt your learning towards that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's a similar example to me, where I speak good French, and when I first moved to France in 2009, I had a job, so I could speak good French already. But the fact that I was working in the language, I got a lot of vocabulary in the technology field. I was working at Apple, and so I understood and started learning all this vocabulary when it came to talking about Macs and iPhones and podcasts and saving and all the menus that you've got on. I learned all of that really quickly in French. What I didn't learn, for example, was vocabulary around going to the doctor and things like that, just because I hadn't been to the doctor. I think my first visit to the doctor in France, was maybe like 1 year into me living here, and I had no idea what was going on. There was words that the person was using, and I had no idea. First time I heard the word gastro, right, a gastro, it sounds a lot more serious in English.
It sounds like a restaurant. Like gastro pub. Gastro. Oh, great.
Pub. Yeah.
Really?
What are some of the biggest challenges that your students have when, like in your classes when they're learning English? Like, what's one of the biggest things where you go, this is always the same problem that everyone has?
I guess there's, let's say, 3 things. Thing number 1 is grammar. And just sort of making the same mistakes in the grammar all the time.
Okay, like welcome in Paris.
Welcome in Paris, for example, right. Or I am living here since 5 years.
Okay, because it should be I have
been living here for 5 years.
Yeah.
And there are lots of examples of that which is influenced from the first language. Another thing is pronunciation.
Yeah.
You know, like you've talked about this before, the importance of being able to pronounce things clearly.
Yeah.
Arguably, if you're going to use English for spoken communication, arguably that is actually the most important thing.
The accent, yeah.
That you might not be accurate in terms of grammar, but if you're understandable, that's really where it counts.
Well, and because you can do the opposite and it be worse. You can be perfect in grammar and perfect in the vocab you're using, but if the words you're saying aren't understandable by the people who you're trying to speak to, then it doesn't matter that your grammar is amazing. People don't understand what you're saying. Everyone in France makes fun of Jane Birkin, Jane Birkin, because she's been here for 2,000 years and she's still got an English accent when she speaks. But here's the difference with her is that she didn't need, like, she had other stuff. She had a full-time job. She was doing other stuff. She didn't need to learn the accent. I just wanted to learn the accent as well because I was moving here and language is a passion of mine. So that's what I wanted to do. Going back to the accent grammar thing, if your accent is too good but your grammar isn't, then you'll end up like me looking like an idiot, where in France my accent's so good that French people think I'm French, but I make basic grammar mistakes, and then French people lose their minds because they don't understand why I make those mistakes.
I think it's part of your identity. There's 2 things with the pronunciation, with the accent. There's intelligibility and then there's identity, right? Intelligibility really is the most important, basically the most important one, because you've got to be able to be understood. People have to understand what you're saying. So work on your word stress and things like that, intonation and stuff. But the other one is identity, and that's really about who you are when you're speaking the language. And to an extent, the issue that you're talking about there is that you've got a slight identity issue, because when you speak French, you speak as if you're a French person. People assume that you're French. So then you get into trouble.
All right, so to conclude this short talk about language and stuff, what is like one tip that you could give the people watching this to take their level of English to the next their level of English to the next level? How can I take my level of English to the next level, because mine is clearly shit?
Other than listening to Luke's English podcast, I would say try and get regular practice. So it's a daily practice, habitual practice. You've got to make it a habit. So regular practice every day, and keep going. Just, make it a regular habit in your life, and enjoy it, and just don't stop.
All right, well, thanks, Luke, for being on this very special episode of the vlog. That's it, basically, for this episode. Tonight, I'm going to perform my 15-minute gig that I talked about yesterday, and then I've got some more stuff next week. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for watching, and and we'll see you tomorrow at 7 for another episode of the vlog. All right, bisous, bye!